Ever get the feeling like you need like a whole new perspective on things? I mean, when it comes to morality, step outside the familiar, the Western traditions, all that.
Yeah, totally. It's like refreshing your philosophical. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I think African ethics offers a really fascinating, well, a different angle, I guess you could say, especially for you coming from a Western philosophy background. I think it's super valuable.
I'm excited to dive in. For our exploration today, we're going to be looking at the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy's entry on African ethics. We're talking about like how morality is viewed, the emphasis on character, the whole idea of personhood as something you achieve, social aspects, the importance of duty, and the humanistic side of it all.
Sounds like a lot to unpack.
It is, but don't worry, we'll make it clear and engaging. So, first off, something you might find interesting, given your philosophy background, how African languages approach ethics.
Well, right off the bat, many sub-Saharan African languages, they don't have direct equivalents for ethics or morality. Instead, you often find terms related to character taking center stage.
Yeah, like in Akan, it's Suban, you uses Nanomo, Yoruba has Iwa, Igbo uses Agwa, Shona have Hunhu, and South Sotho even has a few. Memo, Lokilang, and Boitswaro. That's a lot of emphasis on character.
It is. And it suggests, I think, a very different starting point. African ethical thought seems to be all about the person, the quality of their character, more than abstract principles or rules, at least initially.
As a philosopher, does that ring a bell? Kind of like virtue ethics, maybe?
Absolutely. Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics immediately comes to mind, the focus on cultivating a virtuous character. That's central to ethical living in both traditions.
That's a fascinating connection. So it's not just about whether an action follows a rule, it's about the person doing the action. Are they good? Are they bad? That seems to matter a lot.
Exactly. Good character, with all the virtues like honesty, integrity, compassion, that's seen as the foundation for moral action. Bad actions, well, they come from a lack of good character.
This raises a question, though. How do you figure out the right thing to do in, like, a really tricky situation? If it's all about character, what then?
Right, good question. I think the assumption is that having a good character kind of leads you towards moral actions naturally. And interestingly, good character isn't seen as something you're born with. There's this Ekin saying, one is not born with a bad head, but one takes it on from the earth. What do you make of that?
So it's not like destiny. It's like your character is shaped by your actions, by your experiences.
Exactly. And you see this in how Akin thinkers define character, Subban. It's all about habits that come from your actions, i.e., deeds. So virtue isn't something you're just given. It's something you build through what you do over and over again, like Aristotle and habituation.
It's this process of moral development, then, which means we're responsible for the kind of character we develop, right? That's pretty huge when you think about it.
It really is. Okay, so building on this whole character thing, let's talk about another concept. I think you'll find it especially interesting as a philosopher. Moral personhood as an attained status.
Attained personhood. What does that mean exactly?
So in African ethics, words for person like Onipa and Akan and Enian and Yoruba, they're not just neutral labels. They carry a heavy moral meaning. To say someone is not a person, Onye Onipa or Ki, I see, Enian, that's a serious moral judgment.
So you could be a human being biologically, but still not be considered a person in this ethical sense. Wow, what makes the difference?
It's about failing to live up to certain moral standards. Basically, in this framework, being a person is deeply tied to embodying moral virtue and fulfilling your obligations to the community.
So you don't just start out as a full person. You earn it through being moral and doing your part in the community. That's pretty different from some Western views, isn't it?
Very different. For instance, think about children. They aren't considered full persons right away. It's like they have the potential for personhood, and they grow into it as they develop morally and become part of the community.
Interesting. So the Atkins saying, God created every human being to be good, that needs to be interpreted carefully then.
Exactly. It's not necessarily about everyone being inherently good from birth. It's more like everyone has the potential for good. We're all born with that capacity for virtue, with taboa, a conscience that can guide us. And it's through our choices and actions that we move toward becoming full persons. What are your initial thoughts on this as a philosopher? This idea that you achieve personhood, does it change how you think about moral responsibility? Does it raise questions about, like, who decides who's a person and who isn't?
Big questions for sure. It definitely puts a lot of emphasis on the individual's role in shaping their own moral status. Now, let's switch gears a bit and talk about morality and religion. The entry really pushes back against this idea that African ethics is primarily based on religion.
Right. They make a strong case for the humanistic foundations of African ethics. So, while religion is obviously important in many African societies, the argument is that it's not like some Western ethical systems where everything flows from religious doctrine.
Yeah, they point out that traditional African religion is often non-revealed. There's no single founder, no set of divine revelations that form the basis of morality. Even mystical experiences are often seen as a result of religious belief, not the source of it.
Absolutely. And even when spiritual messages touch on moral behavior, their validity is judged based on what people already understand about morality through lived experience. It's fascinating.
Right, it is. There's this saying, the gods are treated with respect if they deliver the goods, and with contempt if they fail. That seems to suggest that even the gods are subject to human moral judgment.
Exactly. It highlights the autonomy of ethics. It's not just about blindly following divine commands. What do you think about this coming from your philosophical background? How does it compare to debates about divine command theory?
Well, it's definitely a different way of looking at it. Instead of morality being handed down from above, it seems like there's more of a back and forth. Humans have a role in evaluating even the divine based on their own understanding of right and wrong. And that understanding seems to be rooted in human experience, in a concern for well-being and social harmony, like that saying that is good or evil, which tradition has defined as good or evil.
Exactly. The focus is on how actions impact people, how they affect the community, rather than just whether they align with some divine rulebook. You see this humanistic focus in various African ethical traditions. Like in Love Do ethics, there's a big emphasis on fulfilling obligations to your kin. And Bantu morality focuses on the good of the whole tribe. And even religious practices often reinforce moral behavior, even if the values themselves aren't seen as coming directly from the deities.
So it's not like religion is irrelevant, but it's more about reinforcing and supporting a morality that's already there, one that's based on human experience and values.
Exactly. And speaking of human values, the entry really highlights humanity and brotherhood as core moral principles. There are these powerful maxims. Humanity has no boundary, and a human being's brother is, or another human being.
Those are beautiful. They really capture a sense of interconnectedness, of shared humanity, and the fact that many indigenous African languages don't even have a concept of race. That's pretty telling.
Right. The focus is on our common humanity,
Yeah.
on transcending those kinds of superficial differences. And this naturally leads to things like hospitality, generosity, a strong sense of community. These virtues flow from recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every human being. And then there are those maxims. The human being is more beautiful than gold, and it is the human being that counts. Wow.
Those really hit home. They're all about valuing people above material wealth and recognizing that at the end of the day, it's human connection that truly matters, especially when times are tough. Which brings us to the idea of the common good, right?
Right. And that image of the Siamese crocodile with two heads and one stomach, that's such a powerful way to represent the common good. The single stomach symbolizes all those shared needs and interests that bind a community together.
Yeah, it's not just about adding up individual desires. It's about what's truly good for everyone in the community, what allows everyone to flourish. And that seems to be central to the whole communitarian spirit of many African societies.
Absolutely. What's interesting is that they don't see the common good and individual well-being as being in conflict. They see them as intertwined. The common good includes the basic needs and well-being of each individual. So things like security, justice, belonging, these benefit everyone. As a philosopher, I'm curious, this focus on the community, how does it resonate with you, given all the debates in Western thought about individualism versus communitarianism?
I mean, it definitely leans heavily towards the communitarian side, highlighting how interconnected we all are, which leads us to this idea that African ethics is, at its core, social, not individualistic. There's this great saying, when a human being descends from the heavens, he or she descends into a human town. Love that.
It really gets at this idea that we're born into community, into a web of relationships. It's just part of who we are. And that shapes the whole ethical framework, leading to an emphasis on mutual support, collective responsibility, cooperation, interdependence, all those things.
The entry quotes a ton of proverbs that really drive this home, like, the well-being of man depends on his fellow man. Man is not a palm tree that he should be complete. Life is mutual aid. Your neighbor's situation is potentially your situation.
All those proverbs paint a picture of life where individual flourishing depends on the community, and where ignoring the suffering of others is a big no-no. Like that saying, when it sticks into your neighbor's flesh, it is as if it's stuck into a piece of wood. Powerful stuff.
Really powerful. And then the strong social orientation makes sense of why African ethics emphasizes duty.
Definitely. It's all about the responsibilities we have towards each other and the community,
Hmm.
more so than individual rights, at least in terms of emphasis. Duties are often fulfilled because we care about others' well-being, not just because they have a right to something.
And this duty-based perspective seems to blur the lines between what we consider obligatory and what we might call supererogatory in Western thought, going above and beyond the call of duty. In African ethics, actions that really help others are often seen more as obligations, I think. It's about recognizing our shared humanity.
Yeah. Generosity, hospitality, those aren't just nice things to do. They're often seen as duties, as part of what it means to live ethically in a community. It's like, if you can help someone, you should. That's how strong the emphasis on the common good is. The idea is if it benefits others, it's not just praiseworthy, it's something you're obligated to do. It's a really interesting challenge to Western ethical categories, don't you think?
For sure. So, our philosopher listener out there, we've just laid out a whole ethical system, one that centers on character, views personhood as an achievement, and prioritizes duty within a deeply social, humanistic framework. It's pretty mind-blowing when you compare it to Western ethical thought.
Totally. And it raises so many questions, like how does this framework compare with, say, deontology, utilitarianism, virtue ethics? Does this focus on community and attain personhood, offer a different way of thinking about things, or maybe a valuable addition to the Western theories you're already familiar with? And what about this idea of blurring the line between duty and going above and beyond? What are the implications of that? A lot to think about.
Definitely. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, really. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy entry has a whole bunch of references to works by African philosophers who have explored these ideas in much greater depth. If you're intrigued by all this, we encourage you to dive into those sources. It's a journey worth taking.
I couldn't agree more. There's so much to discover, and it might just change how you think about ethics altogether.
For sure. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.